language detectives and dedicated listeners. A very big, warm welcome back to another fascinating episode of Idiom Insights. I'm Emma, and it's genuinely wonderful to be back with you, exploring the vibrant, sometimes confusing, but always rewarding nuances of the English language. Thanks for making us part of your learning journey.
And a very big, cheerful hello from me too. It's Jack, your co-host on this continuing adventure into the heart of everyday English expression. Welcome back to Idiom Insights. Emma, isn't it interesting how just 4 short phrases like the ones we have today can encapsulate such fundamental aspects of human interaction: silence, reconciliation, judgment, and risk? It's the power of figurative language.
It truly is powerful, Jack. They offer such concise ways to express complex ideas and feelings. Today, we're looking at idioms that help us talk about suddenly becoming silent, resolving tension or misunderstandings, the fallacy of surface judgments, and the courage, or perhaps risk, involved in taking an unsupported stance. Really getting to grips with these idioms helps learners understand the subtle undercurrents in conversation, the emotional context that often lies just beneath the surface of the words themselves. It's about decoding the full message.
Decoding the full message, exactly. Moving beyond the literal meaning. So, let's get our decoder rings ready, everyone. On this episode of Idiom Insights, we're going to carefully examine these 4 highly useful expressions. First, sudden silence. Clam up. Why a clam? We'll explore the imagery. Next, resolving tension. Clear the air. Essential for healthy relationships and communication. Then, a warning against superficial judgment. You can't judge a book by its cover. A timeless piece of wisdom. And finally, taking a risk. A familiar friend, this one. Go out on a limb. We'll revisit this important concept.
A fantastic and very practical selection, Jack. These idioms are truly part of the fabric of everyday English. Before we explore why someone might suddenly close up like a clam, we'd just like to share that gentle, friendly reminder from your Idiom Insights team. If you enjoy these deep dives and want to be sure you catch every future episode, please take just a second to hit that subscribe or follow button on your podcast platform. It's the easiest way to keep learning with us.
Indeed it is. It keeps the idiom goodness flowing straight to you. And if you happen to have another second, a like or a positive rating really helps our little podcast reach more ears. It tells the algorithms that people find us useful, which is incredibly encouraging for us. Okay, helpful nudges complete. Emma, let's talk about clams. Why do we use this specific mollusk to describe someone becoming suddenly silent?
That's a great question about the imagery, Jack. Think about a clam. When it feels threatened or disturbed, its natural reaction is to shut its shell tightly, becoming closed off and impenetrable. So, idiomatically, when a person clams up, it means they suddenly become silent and refuse to speak, often because they feel nervous, shy, embarrassed, scared, or perhaps because they are deliberately withholding information. They close themselves off verbally, just like a clam closing its shell. It implies a sudden stop to communication.
Ah, the protective shutting down mechanism. That makes perfect sense. It's not just being quiet, it's an active refusal or inability to speak, usually triggered by some kind of pressure or discomfort. You might see a child clam up when questioned by a stranger or asked about something they feel guilty about. Or an interviewee might clam up if asked a question that makes them extremely nervous or touches on a sensitive topic they don't want to discuss. It suggests a retreat into silence as a defense mechanism or a sign of strong emotion like fear or stubbornness.
Exactly, Jack. That defensive aspect is often key. It's not usually a comfortable or relaxed silence. It's often born out of negative emotion. Someone accused of wrongdoing might clam up, refusing to answer questions. Or someone naturally very shy might clam up when they suddenly become the center of attention in a large group. It signifies a sudden shutdown in verbal communication, making further interaction difficult. It can be frustrating for the person trying to communicate with them.
That frustration is definitely part of the experience for the other person. You're trying to get information or have a conversation, and suddenly communication just stops dead. Let's hear how this plays out for Mia and Mark. Who becomes suddenly uncommunicative?
Mark, I tried talking to young Ben next door earlier, just asking him casually about how his exams went last week. He seemed really down about them.
Oh, Ben? Yes, his mom mentioned he was worried he hadn't done very well, especially in maths. Did he tell you much? Sometimes talking about it helps.
Well, that's what I thought. I asked him gently, how did the exams go, Ben? Were they tough? And initially, he just mumbled something about them being okay. But when I asked specifically about the maths paper, his face just closed off completely.
Closed off? What do you mean? Did he get angry?
No, not angry. He just stopped talking. Completely. He wouldn't make eye contact, just stared at his shoes and wouldn't answer any more questions about it at all. Even when I changed the subject and asked about his football practice, he just gave one-word answers and then made an excuse to go inside. He totally clammed up.
Ah, right. So he just shut down completely when the difficult subject came up? Poor lad. He must be really embarrassed or upset about how he did if he clammed up like that. Probably best not to push him on it then. Maybe wait for him to bring it up if he wants to talk.
Definitely. It was like hitting a brick wall once I mentioned the maths exam. He completely clammed up. I felt bad for him.
You can picture that scene quite clearly, can't you? Ben's sudden withdrawal from the conversation when a sensitive topic, his difficult exam, was raised is a classic example of the idiom.
Absolutely. Mia describes his sudden silence, lack of eye contact, and refusal to engage further as clamming up. Mark understands this immediately as a sign of distress or embarrassment, confirming the idiom's meaning of suddenly becoming silent due to negative emotion. So, listeners, what situations tend to make people clam up?
Now, from shutting down communication, let's move to actively resolving tension. Our second idiom today is clear the air. Jack, this sounds like removing smoke or fog, making things easier to see. What does it mean in terms of relationships or communication?
That's a perfect analogy, Emma. Just like clearing literal smoke allows you to see clearly again, clearing the air means removing the tension, anger, suspicion, resentment, or misunderstanding that has been spoiling a relationship or situation, usually by having an open and honest discussion about the problem. It's about addressing the underlying issues directly in order to dissipate the negative atmosphere and improve communication or understanding going forward. It's essentially about resolving conflict or confusion through honest talk.
Resolving conflict through honest talk. That's the core of it. It implies that there's been some bad air, unspoken tension, resentment, confusion between people, and action needs to be taken to remove it. It's often necessary after an argument or a significant misunderstanding. You might say to a friend after a period of awkward silence following a disagreement, "Look, this tension between us is uncomfortable. Can we please talk properly and clear the air?" It's a direct request to address the problem and restore harmony.
It really highlights the goal of restoring harmony and improving the atmosphere. It's proactive. Instead of just letting resentment simmer or confusion linger, you initiate a conversation specifically to resolve it. It might involve apologies, explanations, clarification of intentions, or just openly expressing feelings. For example, in a team meeting where there's clearly been some misunderstanding about roles and responsibilities leading to friction, the manager might say, "Okay, I sense some tension here. Let's take some time now to discuss everyone's concerns openly and clear the air so we can move forward productively." It's about creating a fresh start by dealing with the pollution in the relationship.
Exactly. Dealing with the pollution to get a fresh start. It's about facing the issue head-on to allow for a healthier atmosphere afterwards. Let's hear from Mia and Mark. What misunderstanding or tension do they need to resolve?
Mark, can we talk for a minute? Things have felt a bit awkward between us since that conversation last night about weekend plans. You seemed quite annoyed when I mentioned I might go visit my sister on Saturday.
Annoyed? Well, yes, Mia. I suppose I was a bit put out. We'd vaguely talked about spending the whole weekend together, maybe going for that long walk we planned. When you suddenly mentioned potentially going to your sister's instead, it felt like you were just ditching our plans without much thought.
Ditching our plans? See, this is why we need to talk. I wasn't ditching anything. My sister called asking if I could possibly pop over for a couple of hours on Saturday afternoon, specifically to help her with something urgent. I hadn't agreed yet, and I was going to suggest we could still do our long walk on Sunday instead. I wasn't canceling our whole weekend.
Oh, right. You didn't explain the urgent help part, you just said you might go visit. So I assumed you just preferred to spend the day with her instead of me, which felt a bit hurtful after we talked about having a weekend together.
And I felt you were being unfairly grumpy about me even considering helping my sister. So we both got annoyed based on a misunderstanding. This is silly. Sister, so we both got annoyed based on a misunderstanding. This is silly. Look, I'm sorry I wasn't clear about the reason. Can we just agree it was a miscommunication?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm sorry I jumped to conclusions and got grumpy without asking for clarification. Whew. It actually feels much better talking about it openly like this. I think we definitely needed to clear the air.
Me too. All that awkwardness was unnecessary. Good. Air cleared. Now, about Sunday's walk?
That dialogue demonstrates the idiom perfectly. There was clear tension and misunderstanding stemming from the previous night's conversation, creating bad air between them.
Exactly. They identified the source of the tension, miscommunication about weekend plans, discussed it openly, clarified intentions, and apologized. Mark concludes that they needed to clear the air, acknowledging that their honest conversation successfully removed the misunderstanding and restored harmony. It shows the idiom's function in conflict resolution. Listeners of Idiom Insights, how important is it to clear the air quickly when misunderstandings arise?
Now, let's move from clearing the air to forming first impressions. Our third phrase is the very famous proverb, "You can't judge a book by its cover." Emma, this seems like straightforward advice against superficiality, but it has deeper implications, doesn't it?
It absolutely does, Jack. On the surface, "you can't judge a book by its cover" means you shouldn't form an opinion or make a judgment about someone or something based solely on their outward appearance, because the appearance might be misleading and not reflect the true character, quality, or value within. Just as a book with a plain or unattractive cover might contain a brilliant story, a person or thing might be very different on the inside from how they initially appear. It's a caution against prejudice and superficial judgment.
That caution against prejudice is really key. It reminds us that appearances can be deceptive in so many ways. Someone might look very stern or unfriendly, but turn out to be incredibly kind and warm-hearted once you get to know them. Or a building might look old and run down on the outside, but be beautifully renovated and welcoming inside. This proverb encourages us to look beyond the surface, to seek deeper understanding before forming conclusions. It applies to people, places, objects, even ideas sometimes. An idea that sounds simple initially might actually be very profound.
Absolutely. It urges depth over superficiality. It's a call for open-mindedness. When meeting new people, for instance, we might be tempted to make snap judgments based on their clothes, hairstyle, or accent. This proverb serves as a mental check, reminding us that these external factors don't necessarily reveal the person's intelligence, kindness, or abilities. Similarly, we shouldn't dismiss a restaurant just because its decor isn't fancy, or assume a product is high quality just because it has flashy packaging. The proverb champions substance over style.
Substance over style? Well put. It's a fundamental piece of wisdom about looking deeper. Let's listen to Mia and Mark. How does this proverb apply to their experience?
Mark, remember when we were looking for a new cleaner a few months ago and we interviewed several candidates?
Yes, I remember that process quite well. There were a couple who seemed very professional on paper, and then there was that older gentleman, Mr. Davies.
Mr. Davies. Yes. Honestly, Mark, if I'm being truthful, when he first arrived for the interview, I had my doubts. He looked quite, well, a bit scruffy. His jacket was worn, his shoes weren't polished, and he seemed quite quiet and unassuming compared to the slicker candidates. My initial impression, just based on his appearance, wasn't overly positive, I admit.
I know what you mean. He didn't have the polished, professional cleaner look that some of the others cultivated. He just looked like a quiet, ordinary older man.
Exactly. But then we interviewed him, and his references were absolutely glowing. They talked about his incredible reliability, his attention to detail, his honesty, and how thorough he was. And during the interview itself, although he was quiet, he came across as very sincere and hardworking. So we decided to give him a chance, despite my initial reservations based purely on his appearance.
And thank goodness we did. He turned out to be absolutely fantastic, hasn't he? Our house has never been so consistently clean. He's incredibly thorough, completely trustworthy, and just quietly gets on with the job brilliantly every week.
He really is the best cleaner we've ever had. It just goes to show, doesn't it? You really can't judge a book by its cover. My initial impression based on his slightly worn clothes was completely wrong. His actual work ethic and character are superb.
That's a perfect real-world example of the proverb in action. Mia admits her initial judgment of Mr. Davies was based purely on his appearance, which didn't align with her expectation of a professional.
Yes, but his actual performance and character proved to be excellent, completely contradicting that first impression. Mia concludes with the proverb, "You can't judge a book by its cover," to acknowledge her mistaken initial assessment and highlight the truth that outward appearance didn't reflect inner quality. Listeners, can you recall a time when you misjudged a book by its cover, positively or negatively?
And finally, let's revisit an idiom we've touched upon before, but it's so useful it bears repeating, perhaps with a different focus. Our fourth idiom is go out on a limb. Jack, we know this means taking a risk, often by saying or doing something unsupported. Can we explore the motivations behind it a bit more? Why do people do it?
That's a great angle, Emma. Revisiting allows for deeper exploration. People usually go out on a limb for reasons they feel strongly about. It could be driven by a sense of justice, like defending someone you believe is being treated unfairly, even if it makes you unpopular. It could be driven by strong conviction, like promoting a radical new idea you genuinely believe will work, despite widespread skepticism. Or it could be driven by loyalty or compassion, perhaps taking a personal risk to help a friend in trouble. The common thread is usually a strong internal motivation that overrides the fear of isolation, criticism, or failure. It's rarely done casually. There's usually a powerful why behind sticking your neck out like that.
That internal motivation is key. It's about prioritizing your principle, belief, or loyalty over personal comfort or safety within the group consensus. It requires a degree of courage because you are intentionally making yourself vulnerable. You're stepping away from the safety of the crowd or the established norm onto potentially unstable ground. The limb. Sometimes it pays off. Your unique perspective is valued. Your controversial idea proves brilliant. Your defense of a friend changes opinions. Other times, the limb breaks. Metaphorically speaking, you face criticism, your idea fails, or you become isolated. But the act itself is defined by that willingness to take the risk for a reason you deem important enough.
Absolutely. It's a calculated risk, even if the calculation is more emotional or ethical than purely logical sometimes. The potential reward, upholding justice, proving your idea, helping someone, is seen as outweighing the potential cost of disagreement or failure in the individual's mind at that moment. Let's see how this plays out for Mia and Mark in a new context.
Mark, you know my colleague Sarah? The one who is usually quite quiet and tends to agree with the majority in team meetings?
Yes, Sarah from the design team. She seems very capable, but usually avoids conflict, right?
Exactly, but in our big project review meeting yesterday, something quite remarkable happened. The senior manager was presenting the proposed final design, and everyone was nodding along, ready to approve it. It looked fine, aesthetically pleasing.
Okay, sounds straightforward. What happened?
Well, just as the manager was about to move on, Sarah, looking incredibly nervous, put her hand up. She very politely but firmly pointed out a fundamental flaw in the structural integrity of the proposed design, something quite technical that apparently everyone else, including the engineers, had overlooked. She explained how it could potentially fail under certain stress conditions.
Wow, that took guts. Pointing out a major flaw in front of senior management when everyone else was ready to approve it, especially for someone who normally avoids the spotlight.
Tell me about it. There was a definite awkward silence for a moment. The manager looked surprised, the engineers looked uncomfortable. Sarah was definitely going out on a limb by raising such a critical issue so late in the process, potentially embarrassing senior people. But she held her ground, explaining her technical reasoning calmly.
And what was the outcome? Did they listen?
Yes. After examining her point, the engineers confirmed she was absolutely right. Her observation potentially saved the company from launching a faulty product. The manager publicly thanked her for her courage and attention to detail. She really went out on a limb, but her expertise and conviction paid off. I was so impressed.
What a fantastic example of courage driven by expertise and responsibility. Sarah, despite her usual quiet nature and the social risk, felt compelled to speak up about a critical flaw.
Precisely. Mia uses going out on a limb twice to describe Sarah's risky but ultimately vindicated action of challenging the consensus based on her technical knowledge. It highlights the courage involved in taking an unsupported stance for the right reasons. Listeners of Idiom Insights, what motivates you to potentially go out on a limb?
And with that inspiring story of principled risk-taking, we conclude our exploration of 4 more common and useful English idioms. Let's quickly review the phrases we've examined today.
It's been another thoroughly enjoyable session. Today on Idiom Insights, we covered clam up, to suddenly become silent or refuse to speak, often due to nerves or guilt. Clear the air, to resolve tension or misunderstanding through open discussion. You can't judge a book by its cover. Don't form opinions based solely on outward appearance. Go out on a limb to put yourself in a risky or unsupported position, often by expressing a unique opinion or taking a stand.
Excellent! We sincerely hope that our detailed discussions and the contextual dialogues have helped you not only understand these idioms, but also appreciate their nuances and applications. Remember, understanding the why behind an idiom often helps solidify the what.
Absolutely. Keep thinking about the imagery and the feelings these phrases convey. And if you found today's episode of Idiom Insights insightful and helpful for your English studies, we would be truly grateful if you could take just a second to leave us a like, a rating, or a positive review. It really does encourage us.
And please, make sure you're subscribed or following Idiom Insights so you don't miss our next episode. We release new content regularly, exploring more fascinating corners of the English language. We absolutely love having you as part of our dedicated community of learners.
We really do. Thank you for being here and engaging with us. Until next time, keep up your fantastic work, stay curious, and enjoy every step of your language learning adventure. Goodbye for now. Bye.
Goodbye, everyone. Take wonderful care, stay safe, and happy learning.